Hey everyone, welcome to Ink Scribes, the comics podcast where we discuss the art and craft of comics. I'm Colin Singh and I'm joined by my co-hosts Eric Savadsky and Taylor Stoff. Today, we have a very special episode where we're discussing Stan Sakai and his book, Usagi Yojimbo. The book that we're going to be looking at is Usagi Yojimbo Saga, Volume 1. The Saga series is essentially the omnibus collection of all of Usagi Yojimbo's tales. There's at least 300, if not more, issues of material to go through. The first volume collects the second volume and some of the third.
I was a little confused because I started reading this. It says book one, and then there's references to other comics, the previous episodes, and yeah, it was a little confusing. But before this is the Fantagraphics stuff, and I think Fantagraphics has the exclusive print rights to those '80s stories.
Yeah,
and
overall, just the way it works is so each saga volume collects about 3 or 4 trades. So there's a chronological order of trades. But even of those collected trade paperbacks, I don't think they collect any of the Fantagraphics material.
Yeah, so Fantagraphics just has the exclusive rights to those early works, sort of, because I read some of this stuff digitally on the Dark Horse digital app, and you can read that early Usagi stuff digitally on that site. Because I managed to read the first story.
I had to read it, I think, in a Fantagraphics collection.
What do you guys think of this cover?
It makes me immediately think of Throne of Blood.
Yep.
Which, if nobody's seen it out there, you gotta see it. Especially just for the finale. That this is, I feel like it's got to be referencing directly.
Oh yeah, and from my experience with Kurosawa movies, even if a movie you're watching doesn't fully work for you, or maybe it might drag in some places, there's always one scene that is just a mic drop moment that makes the entire viewing experience worth it. And this scene being referenced is probably one of the most spectacular action scenes you will ever see in a movie.
It really is. I saw it on the big screen in 2024, just knowing like what was coming, and I had even forgotten how intense it is. I was like, yeah, they use real arrows. I forgot how many and how intense it is. It was amazing.
Taylor, where do you see all those films? Is there a theater in Calgary that
there
plays
is?
all the
Yes, the Globe Theater in Calgary, Alberta. Shout out! It is. It's great. I'm gonna be seeing 12 Angry Men tomorrow. There.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man!
Right on. So Stan Sakai has been a lifelong comics creator. Usagi Yojimbo he created back in 1983, or maybe even earlier than that, but his first appearance was in 1984. The first volume was printed by Fantagraphics, and the second was printed by Mirage, owned by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. And then later on, it was pretty much for the rest of its run collected by and published by Dark Horse. He has had a color series that's been printed by IDW. Stan Sakai, he's 71 years old. He's still a lifelong guy. He's still going strong, and
very impressive.
Like super. He's an all-timer, man. He's won every major comics award. Every North American major comics award. He's won Eisners for lettering, best serialized story. He's won Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Inkpot Awards. He's won Harvey Awards. He's been recognized by the National Cartoonist Society. There's just like accolades upon accolades. He's had a Netflix series based on Usagi Yojimbo that was put out 2022. And of course, like I've never like. I'm just kind of getting ramped up, but I love Stan Sakai, and I swear I've never heard anyone say a negative word about this guy or Usagi Yojimbo. Further to that, every Usagi Yojimbo story that I've ever read is brilliant, okay? I've never read a bad story, especially in this or anything else. Even when he crosses over with Ninja Turtles, right? He's been on the TV show in the '80s.
Yeah.
Been in the 2000s TV show. There is a collected story in this, but it's not the first crossover between Usagi and the Turtles. And it's obviously definitely not the last. It was still a story published in the '80s. We'll get to that in a second. So these omnibus editions have been back in print from Dark Horse. They are over 600 pages of material, and they cost $30 American, I believe, and $40 Canadian. So it's very, very affordable stuff. I promise you, money back guarantee. If you read this book, you will not be disappointed.
Colin's not getting paid to say this, by the way.
I am not getting paid to say any of this. I'm not getting paid for anything on this show. Everything that I say, I stand by it 100%. Okay,
but we are willing to sell out. Just putting it out there.
Oh yeah.
We're willing to sell out all our opinions, and
we're only going to buy more comics with it anyway, right?
I mean, more people reading this is great.
Me, I got boxes and boxes of comics. This is how I live.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And really easy to drop into, I've found. Like, I know there is an overarching story, but it's not so set that you can't be like, fun rabbit samurai kills dudes and saves people.
But it's that too.
Yeah, right? Exactly. You can drop in, you can follow it.
And something I like about it is that it's a prime example of storytelling that occasionally goes down dark paths, but is still comfortably sitting in that all ages range.
Yeah.
You do see fights, but you don't see a lot of blood. And I don't know. I think we as a culture can be a little panicky about what kids can handle. And I don't know. Yeah. I think each of us were exposed to comics and movies that we probably shouldn't have been when we were too young, and we all turned out fine.
Yeah, so, we're fine. Yeah. We're doing a YouTube show about comic books. We're fine.
Oh no, that's not the selling point for.
No, we are doing great.
Yes,
we turned out just fine.
The show was basically geared towards like under 6, I think.
Oh.
Because I don't know, they've got all these statistics and charts and graphs, and they basically say that kids are different than how we grew up. And apparently all that information, all that data is telling the bigwigs at Netflix that kids stop watching cartoons at age 6 and move over to video games.
Oh,
and
okay.
So the idea of creating a really cool TV show for like a 9-year-old is just, there's no business plan for that, I guess. And that's why we don't get the Usagi Yojimbo cartoon that we all want. We got something different.
To be clear to the audience, the Netflix series is not based around Miyamoto Usagi, who's the main character of this book. It's actually set in the future, and it's a descendant of Usagi.
Which feels like a change now that Eric has mentioned that the algorithm that told them that. That feels like a change. Almost as like, come on, kids, it's kind of like a video game. Just stick around for just a little bit longer. You like rabbits and samurai stuff, but now it's in the future, and we made it with a computer.
But Stan Sakai got approval on every last aspect beyond that. So, and I believe he still, his company still keeps the rights, the entire rights to that show. I think they can shop it around. Oh. It was not renewed for season 3, and I think they can shop it around to whatever network is willing to pick it up. Stan Sakai's story is a healthy mix of luck, having the right friends, and having good lawyers and representation. Because, I don't know, there's this mantra in comics, a Jack Kirby quote. Basically, comics will
break your heart, kid.
Comics will break your heart. And he is the rare example, which is becoming more and more common these days, fortunately. But he's the rare example of someone who created something and he still controls it 100%.
From day one. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's kept. Yeah, and he's like the only one I know who has been doing. I don't think it. There's no like jam session book where other people do a Usagi story or anything, is there?
I think
Well,
there are plans for that.
Oh,
to,
okay.
to speak
Which
to that,
makes sense as a 71-year-old.
yeah. But Stan Sakai, he's also the letterer for Gru the Wanderer. I don't think Gru is monthly anymore. I think it
Oh,
comes
okay.
out, maybe a story a year or something like that. Don't hold
Right,
me to
right.
that. But he's been the
The
letterer for
occasional miniseries.
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And Usagi's obviously crossed over with Gru, but that's a very recent
Oh, okay.
series. For
Oh
years,
no, I think in the like second appearance he walks by he's walking in a crowded area and he walks by Gru and they each have thought bubbles, which is very funny.
yeah.
Miyamoto is saying ugly barbarian and Gru is walking by thinking they're both thinking this, sorry. Thinking stupid samurai and they're both like giving them each other the stink eye, which is just sort of a cameo, so probably doesn't count.
Stan Sakai's biggest influences are Akira Kurosawa, the filmmaker, and Osamu Tezuka, who's considered the godfather of Japanese comics. And it's very apparent when I'm reading an Usagi tale that it's very much like a Tezuka tale. Definitely, you can see the influence is very strong. I got into Osamu Tezuka in my adult years. It's so crazy how he sucks you in, and the art is very simple style. It's very cartoony, but he does lend some realistic style to like the backgrounds and trees and clouds and all that kind of stuff. But the characters themselves are very cartoony like. But you invest in the characters so quickly that you just completely forget.
He was inspired by Kurosawa films and also Hiroshi Inagaki's samurai trilogy. It told the historical. Told the story of the historical figure Musashi Miyamoto. And I have not seen the samurai trilogy. I've always meant to. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Kurosawa films. I've been working my way through his library of works for years. Um, And I think studying Kurosawa's work is incredibly instructive when trying to
Oh,
learn
yeah.
composition. When I hear the term "every frame of painting," I think of Kurosawa. I especially love his black and white films. I work primarily in black and white. I do collaborate with colorists, but everything I do is in black and white. So I just find studying black and white film is a good exercise for comic artists.
Yeah, no, it's the first one I've seen is great. I like you. I keep meaning to go through. Well, I keep meaning to see the next two, and I've been working my way through Kurosawa movies for a decade and a half. If it comes to the globe, I'm there. And the thing I always think of when, because you make a good point about every frame of painting, but I can't remember if it was, I think it was on the Seven Samurai Criterion Collection commentary where one of the commentators pointed out nothing that happens on everything that happens on screen is because Kurosawa wants it to be there. There are zero accidents. There's no allowing for the environment when he's shooting on location to suddenly cause something to happen. Like if he needs wind, he will
Yeah,
generate
every
wind.
gust of wind was
Yep, it's
perfectly timed.
yep, it's the. I mean, there's the famous, well, maybe not famous, but the well-known story of putting ink into water so that the rain in, I think it's Rashomon, is more noticeable. Like he dyes the rain because he's like, you can't see it; it's clear.
There's
It's
moments where like the villain stands up and then behind him there's a burst of flame and it's
yeah.
just
In the final
perfectly timed.
battle of um, Seven Samurai, there's a part where like a character pulls a bow back and like every other character moves back with him, and then as soon as the bow is fired, the villagers move forward towards the the raiders. Like it's all so, yeah, it's
It's
like a
symphonic.
dance.
That's totally symphonic, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there are scenes in Seven Samurai where there are huge crowds of people, and they're all carefully organized
Yeah.
in a very specific way that if I just showed one frame, you could study that frame and actually figure out what exactly is going on in the story in that moment. It's the compositions are so perfectly thought out.
It's no wonder Lucas and Spielberg were obsessed with this guy. Just
They revived his
absolutely obsessed.
career when
Yeah,
his career was done.
yeah. Um,
But do you guys know much about Musashi Miyamoto?
all I
Yeah.
know is what's in the movie that I've seen, and Vagabond, the manga, that is quite a bit closer to. Um, well, at least, well, I was going to say closer to the real guy, but I don't think that's the case. It's closer to the novel that a lot of this is based on. That a lot of the information we have about him comes from.
So
Yeah. So
so
me,
Musashi Miyamoto was a historical figure, right?
He's like, I think he's classified
yeah,
as a cultural hero. Like there was probably that guy, but a
he
lot of
was a
what,
real life swordsman.
yeah,
He was actually born a peasant, and he was not born into a samurai family. So he learned his sword skills with a stick to start, and then he did write a book, the Book of Five Rings.
it's like it's the positive aspects of like the warrior mindset, I guess. The
Fearlessness,
Yeah,
anticipation, being free, being like water, like Bruce Lee would say, right? I
yeah.
mean, I don't. That's not exactly how he verbalizes it. I'm just saying that it's kind of one of those philosophical books that.
Everyone's first introduction to Usagi Yojimbo.
My friend giving me the I think probably the first Fantagraphics collection. Yeah.
I had the action figure, the Ninja Turtles action figure, and I
Oh
saw him in
yeah.
the original Ninja Turtles '80s cartoon.
Yeah, so that was my first introduction as well, as
Yeah.
from the Ninja Turtles cartoon. And I'd imagine we can relate to the fact that we just thought it was just another Ninja Turtles character.
100%.
Oh yeah.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought for the longest time.
yeah.
Actually,
It
it
wasn't
wasn't
until like
until
later on in life that you see there's Usagi Yojimbo, a spin-off comics.
when I started reading
No, it's not
Wizard
a spin-off
Magazine.
comic.
When I
It's
started
an
reading
original
Wizard
creation.
Magazine, that's when they started showing the solicits for Usagi Yojimbo the comic. And even then, I kind of at first I thought that it was just kind of like a spin off of the Turtles, but no, it was actually its own a book by Sakai. It was a creator-owned book with its own story, its own mythos, and everything. It wasn't connected to the Turtles at all. It's just that because he knew Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, he was quite close friends with them, that they crossed over quite a bit. And this, like I said before, this collection does collect not the first crossover, not the last crossover, but they've crossed over many times. So this is probably the second or third time that they're meeting up.
He does slot into that universe very well. Like he's a good foil for the turtles.
Yeah, so like the Ninja Turtles were created like 6 months before Usagi Yojimbo, so they
Whoa.
were pretty much on the scene at almost the exact same time. They were black and white independent comics featuring anthropomorphic characters, and so they basically saw each other as peers, Stan Sakai and Eastman and Laird, and yeah, they were mutual fans, and yeah, they just thought it would be fun to cross over every now and then. The story of how Usagi Yojimbo gets onto the Ninja Turtles cartoon is that Eastman and Laird basically asked him at a San Diego Comic Con, "Hey, do you want a Usagi Yojimbo action figure?" And he's like,
Ah.
"Yeah, yeah, sure." And they said, "Well, of course, if there's going to be an action figure, he's going to have to be on this cartoon as
It's got to
well."
be on the commercial that we play every day.
Yes, uh, and and it's very cool because uh, I don't think Stan Sky had any representation around that time, but they basically said, "Oh well, you can use some of our guys." And what's very cool is he got, as Taylor put it, a commercial, basically the TV show with this commercial to sell action figures, and
Yeah.
the action figures sold like 2 million units, and the name Usagi Yojimbo got injected into my brain and got injected into Colin's brain when we were
Yeah.
like very young.
Yeah.
And what's very cool about that is it was just because of a friendship, and yeah, he what's beautiful about it is he got to keep the rights throughout all of that.
That's you don't hear that often. It's nice that all three of them are just being cool with each other, which is like you hear stories of Jack Kirby making a handshake deal with Martin Goodman and then getting screwed over
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to hear when Eastman and Laird are like, yeah, no, like we told our friends something and we're going to stick to it.
A handshake deal from Eastman and Laird actually meant something.
Yeah,
Those guys
apparently,
are.
yeah. Which is like, oh, I love that. That's awesome.
In that Ninja Turtles episode and the action figure, do you guys remember what the action figure was called?
It
Is it?
was Usagi Yojimbo, was it not?
It was called Usagi Yojimbo, but like the figure, the action figure we played with as a kid was Usagi Yojimbo, but that's not the actual character's name.
What's
What is it?
So
Miyamoto Usagi?
yeah, so the action figure should have said Miyamoto Usagi, but I think it was just smart marketing to again inject the name Usagi Yojimbo into our impressionable minds.
Which makes
Gotcha, right?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that I don't think a lot of 9-year-olds are going to pick up. Like, well, the book is called this, but the character is called this.
Yeah.
Right. So the inspiration for Miyamoto Usagi is primarily Miyamoto Musashi, the real life swordsman. In this case, Usagi is a Ronin. So each trade does collect like a good chunk of material spread across maybe 3 or 4 trade paperbacks. This one collects volume 2 and a little bit of volume 3. So there's 4 different introductions here. The first introduction is by Jamie Rich, the comics editor for primarily known for Oni Press. The second is by William Stout, and then later we've got introductions by James Robinson and Kurt
Oh,
Busiek.
James Robinson. Nice.
So in this first omnibus, his origin is told in just 4 pages. And these 4 pages are actually the prelude to another story, which is also collected in this book called Noodles. But this story is very cut and dry. It's just 4 splash pages. So Usagi was a samurai who served a warlord named Mifune, like named after Toshiro Mifune. His lord was killed in battle, and he, instead of falling on his sword, committing seppuku, he decided to go on a warrior's journey. And so every tale after this is basically him just on his travels. And I have to say, Usagi Yojimbo is Miyamoto Usagi is such a versatile character that the way this works is there is an overarching chronology, but Sakai jumps back and forth between when he's younger, learning to become a samurai, to when he's older. And the other thing is this character experiences so much in terms of uh, life experience, you could say. He makes friends, he gets betrayed, he falls in love, he gets his heart broken. He is very inquisitive, so through his experience, on his travels, he meets a seaweed farmer, and you, as the reader, get to learn about how seaweed is grown and harvested and all
Oh,
that kind of stuff. So, in this case, and the other thing is, one thing I love about this story is like the story of Usagi is that you invest so much into the characters right away, where his allies, he'll team up with somebody, like he teams up with Gen, who is a rhinoceros bounty hunter. And Gen is, a very charismatic guy. He kind of keeps to himself, just like Usagi. But when the story's over, and they go their separate ways, and you see him again later on, and as soon as he pops up, Usagi's like, "Oh, again," and even you as the reader invested so much in the character. You're like, oh, he's back. Oh, how's he been doing? What's he been up to? Right? You invest so much into the life of Usagi. So the primary focus of this video is we all read Jizo, which is an 8-page short story that's mentioned by Jamie Rich in his introduction. Uh, Basically, it takes place over 24 hours, and it's just one single panel repeating. So out of 8 pages, there's 3 panels per page. And the story is about a woman who lays an idol at the scene of her son's murder. Her son was murdered by some bandits, and the police never caught them.
It's this same sort of camera view throughout the entire thing, which is an interesting exercise uh, for a comic. What did you guys think of this story?
That's what I thought as well. Is it's an interesting use of the form because the layout is the same, the background is the same, everything, as you say, the camera, for lack of a better term, is fixed. Um, it's interesting that it creates this, because it's so repeated, it creates like this rhythm, right? Of like, it's
Yeah.
calm, it's dark, action explodes, and then we come back to the calmness. It's this whoa, whoa, right? And it's you slip into it so easily. I blew through it on the first read so quickly that I was like, wait, no, I got to go back. Like I want to exist in this more. I want to, but like I said, the rhythm just it's a interesting exploration of the form and how you move through time and space, both in the story and in the book.
Yeah, and if I were to guess, he came up with the story first, and then came up with the way to tell the story afterwards. Because this story, it's a very simple story where a grieving mother puts this idol down as a, I guess for our modern Western viewpoint, it's kind of a grave site, or I don't know how to put it, a way of honoring her.
The scene of the crime, essentially.
Yeah, it almost seems like when you see bouquets tied to poles at like
Yes.
accident scenes,
Yeah.
which is like,
And
both are pretty grim, but this is a lot more. If you haven't read this is a lot more fun than any of that.
yeah, and so the story goes that she's mourning the death of her son, and she makes references to five what bandits
Yeah,
that robbed and killed her son, and then we get to see passersby acknowledge the idol in different ways. As most people are ignoring the idol, but suddenly when we see five bandits show up, we don't have to be told
yeah,
that these are the ones who murdered the kid. We just count there's five of them, and they're up to no good because they're attacking a familiar looking samurai rabbit that is walking by. I guess Miyamoto, inadvertently avenges the death of this son without realizing it, without the intent of that. But
And then the police
um,
show
that,
up and they see his dirty work, and he just walks away.
which is an interesting way to frame a story around your very heroic hero, right? Usually, at least from the stories I've read of Usagi Yojimbo, he shows up into places and he'll take action, but this is more of a happenstance. It's
yeah, he's kind of just defending himself, right?
Yeah, but it
Well,
is a nice, it's almost indicative of like the attitude of the book itself, in that like he can't help but be heroic even when he doesn't know that he's doing that. He can't help but be an avenger of the downtrodden
let me
despite
speak,
being taken by surprise.
Yeah,
let me
that's
speak to
well
that
said.
actually for Usagi's
Yeah.
character. So Usagi, I wouldn't call him fearless, but he definitely accepts his fate, whatever it will be.
Yeah.
He's been attacked by one. or even 2 dozen or an army of ninjas or bandits or even demon soldiers and stuff like that. This book goes into the supernatural. He's experienced all kinds of different things, but he always accepts that, okay, I have to take these guys out. And he's
Yeah.
never lost a fight. He's had close calls, like obviously if somebody shoots an arrow at him and somebody blocks the arrow, he's had his life saved by supporting characters, but he always, always, always wins the fight. He always just accepts what's in front of him and he just goes forth and does it. So there
You're
are
saying
scenes
he's
that
never been defeated before?
I don't, well, not in any of the stories in here. I mean, there are
Oh, okay.
some coming of age tales like this one right here, which is just after the short story, Usagi's Garden, where he's obviously now learning to be a samurai. He's a small child and he's got a sensei. So in those cases, then yeah, he for the sake of
Isn't
learning experiences,
isn't that the supposed legend of Miyamoto Usagi? Is that
never lost a fight.
Yeah.
or sorry, the
Never
actual
won.
historical figure? Yeah, he
Yeah, he
never lost
never
a
lost
fight.
a fight. Yeah. Um, and in different ways too. And obviously, Sakai does find creative ways to make him win the fight. But a lot of the time, and he does very seldom use double splash pages. He uses them obviously for dramatic effect. But when he does for a fight scene, usually it's like him against 24 other guys or 30 other guys. And it's just 4 or 5 panels of him killing everybody. That happens a lot in this. And I
And no
love that.
blood. There's no
No
blood.
blood. No
And what do you
blood.
guys think of the effect when he shows someone has died?
It's the softening of a real life thing, right? Like people
Very
die.
B-rated.
Kids know that. We
Yeah.
all know that. And it's, the depiction of it is important. Skull means death. We all know that. It's a good use of iconography to communicate what's going on without any gratuity to the violence.
And
Which I think
also,
is what allows it to be an all ages comic, right? Like we know they're dying, but so do kids that would read this, without it being like, "Ugh, what the hell?" It's not like Nazi faces melting at the end of Raiders or something.
Using effects like this actually cuts on the drama of someone dying. Usually they'll take 2 or 3 panels from someone to kill and the eyes roll in the back of their head and the blood's coming out and all that kind of stuff. That can take up a lot of time. But in this case, very quickly establishes that he's killed all of his enemies. He's putting his sword away right away in the second panel and he walks off in the third. Very quickly, like he uses his time quite effectively.
Yeah, and I think the stillness of Usagi is also key to that working. Is like it's not, and now I'm gone in the night. It's okay. That's been taken care of.
Right.
This is still a thing that I have done, and I will live in this moment. It's a
Yeah.
nice, even though this is a quick, very very regimented story that's moving through itself quickly. It's interesting that Sakai allows the character to take that time to exist in that moment after he's defeated these bandits.
yeah, and it's all told with the visuals and with a minimal amount of dialogue. There's way too many comics nowadays that rely so much on captions,
Mm,
um,
Yeah.
very flowery captions. This is a visual medium, and this story would have been ruined by captions explaining the historical context of things, or captions declaring, that Usagi has killed all these people. Uh, it's just a nice visual representation to communicate that these characters have died, and this is all the information we need, isn't it?
yeah,
Well,
it's so economical.
the overall storytelling technique across all the tales, I mean, outside of like folklore, like he'll go into like a little bit of mythological folklore, explaining giving some context to, let's say, some supernatural threat. But overall, the storytelling is very present. It's very matter of fact, and it's basically just a guy walking, and he gets into some stuff. He meets some people, he talks to those people, he experiences some things, and he just keeps it moving. Um,
Could you
and
flip back actually to the last panel of the 8-pager? Because
Gotcha.
what I really appreciate is the smile on the
That's
totem
right. Yeah, I forgot to
at
bring
the
that up.
very end. It's such a placid face the whole time, and then once his mom brings him the jacket, it really does tie in. Like, this isn't just marking where her son died. It's like an avatar of her son as well. Like, there is
Yeah.
something of him in this place, which I think makes the whole thing, the whole story, retroactively more impactful. Like, and because it's only 8 pages, you can be like, oh, right. Like, going back, now I know it's going to smile. I can reread this with that emotional impact.
Yeah.
So I wanted to actually bring up the concept of death in Japanese culture, maybe even Buddhist culture, but in this case, it's so this woman's son was murdered, and so she lays down this idol, and this idol, Jizo, is the guardian of the souls of dead children. The souls of the children are doomed to pile stones in the dry riverbed of souls, and they lay pebbles down in front of the idol as an offering to just take a little bit of the load off the children who are supposed to lay these pebbles down.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
another segue
Woof.
to that, in Jeff Darrow's Shaolin Cowboy, I remember an interview where he was mentioning that, like, essentially, either in Buddhist culture and Japanese culture, that you are doomed to automatically go to hell and you have to fight your way out of hell, which is why it's kind of law that you have to join the army. You have to serve 2 years in the army in a lot of Asian cultures to learn to fight, because when you die, whether you were good or bad, you're going to hell and you have to fight your
Jeez.
way out. And Darrow did
That
say
is.
that he intends to end Shaolin Cowboy with Cowboy dying and going to hell, and he just has to fight his way out.
Really? I hadn't heard that. That's
Woof.
Yeah,
interesting.
this was an interview back like years ago. This interview always stuck with me because I'm like, oh, I can't wait for that ending.
I can't
It
wait
has
to read
yet to
that.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be. But you see, okay, off topic. But you see, like Shaolin Cowboy, he'll spend 3 or 4 issues on one fight scene, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I love it. I love it. I eat it up all day. I can't wait for the next one and the next one and the next one. But it's pretty freaking morbid that he is going to die. And guess what? He's going to hell and he has to fight his way out of hell. And that's where it ends, right?
That would be a hell. That's a real Sopranos style ending. It's like, I'm in hell, cut to black. Just put dukes up.
And that goes to what I was saying earlier about how much the audience needs. We didn't have that context up until Colin just told us that, but it doesn't change the emotional impact of that ending at all. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it might change it. Okay, it changes it a little bit, but without that information, I still had an emotional reaction to this ending.
Yeah, because it's still connecting the death of a child to the mother. Like, what an awful thing to happen to everybody involved. But at the same time, actually, these middle panels are interesting, I think, because, like, her life is like something. A terrible thing happened to her, but the dinosaur pets don't know that. The uh, aristocrat in that crate being carried don't know that. It's, it's just this part of it's part of life, and it's this. I don't know. It's the sort of thing that I would expect from a samurai story in general. Of, yeah, bad things happen, but it's part of the continuum of existence. You just keep going. Like Usagi himself, he doesn't run away. He deals with the situation as it is.
I want to
Yeah.
quickly speak to the fight scene here.
Yeah.
So, one thing I've noticed, and I've in preparation for this, I dissected pretty much all the fight scenes in this book. So this one takes place. If you want to count this panel where nothing happens yet, they all just show up, and he's kind of sizing them up, and then the swords are drawn. From the swords being drawn, to these next three panels, there is actually a continuity here where he leaps forward, gets out of the way of everybody because they're all rushing him. So he steps out, and then he comes back in. And then from there, it cuts to everybody's dead. So it shows that he's got a strategy already. And then he dispatches all of them, and then they're all laying at his feet. So this is a double page splash where Usagi, his friend Gen, and the turtles are fighting a bunch of ninjas. And it's just two wide shots. But if you really look at it, this is the first shot where it shows it from Usagi's perspective. And then the camera actually turns. So it's, in a way, if this was animated or filmed, it would be a 360 angle. So you see how all the turtles, everyone is in position, and then it flips. So you see how Gen's to his left, and now he's to his right.
Oh, because he's okay. So it's spinning around
It's
with
spinning
him.
around, yeah.
Yeah.
So he does stuff like this, but it's very, like, a lot of this stuff, because the style is actually simple. He's got beautiful line work, but it's hard to miss, or it's hard to not miss. Sorry, if you blink, you'll miss it.
It's definitely not something I would have expected, but yeah, now that you've pointed it out, I'm seeing Michelangelo with the nunchucks on the left side of the top panel, and then in the middle panel, he's on the other side. Yeah, it's all flipped, and I think that actually does a great job of communicating that Usagi, like when he's wound up, he's spun around.
Yeah. Like, I've gone back to this book countless times in the past, and you always find something like that. His intentions, it's so multi-layered, like an onion, man. Like the stories, yeah, like you can read them start to finish, A to Z. It's beginning, middle, and end, and you get a lot out of it that way. But when you go back and you see these little nuances, and you can actually pick up a lot of his Tezuka influences. So the first four panels here are just the motion of the hoe digging into the ground before you set up the establishing shot. Tezuka has done a lot of this kind of thing in his work, and not to say that he's aping it, or he's definitely using it as inspiration, but this sort of thing shows the grit of the quality of life that they have, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
shows
it's
the
a
amount of
manual
force that
labor.
needs to be required to till the land, to plant crops. And this is actually a story where Usagi is now a child, and he's learning from his sensei how to become a samurai. There are, I think there's two or three stories in here where, as a young child, he learns about death. A wounded samurai comes upon their hut, and he does pass away, but they go onto a battlefield, and then Usagi learns for the first time about death. This is a three-part story called Battlefield. And in this story, again, he's probably a teenager. Usagi is probably a teenager, and he's learning from his sensei. And they are visited by a wounded soldier from a battle. So after they tend to the soldier, they head out to the battlefield, and there's a lot of life lessons that he learns from this tale alone. Usagi is told by his sensei that a victory is actually, the greater the body count, the better the victory, which is
Mm.
really horrific. So the more people that you've killed and the more people that have died overall, the better of a war that it was, right? The more honor there is in it. And he doesn't have a sword at this point. He's learning with a stick, but he comes across a dead soldier who has a short sword. What's it called? A
Yeah.
wakizashi, which is a short sword. So he's like, well, it's better that I get it than some, what do you call them? Some looter.
Mm.
So it's better that I get it than some looter. So he takes the sword from this dead soldier. And then he just can't stop thinking about it. He starts to dream about the dead soldier. He tells his sensei that he has one of those dreams within a dream where he tries to wake his sensei up, and the sensei turns over and it's the dead soldier that he took the sword from. So towards the end, he resolves to return the short sword back to the dead soldier, and he begs for forgiveness. And then from here, the warlord that he is going to serve, Mifune, shows up. They catch him trying to return the sword, and the penalty for theft is you get your hands cut off. So they're about to cut his hands off, but then Mifune shows up, and Usagi stands up, and he looks fearless. So Mifune lets him go, and he says that one day he will probably serve us, and which
Hmm.
he ends up doing, which is the whole origin of Usagi. And it's a
That's very cool.
fantastic story. I
That's
have
really,
It's a really well told tale, guys. Like, you
yeah.
gotta read this. Again, it's like the style is very G rated. Obviously, there even though there's all these corpses and stuff, there's no blood, there's no gore or anything like that. But he does use a lot of effects, like here, right, with the eyes. He plays when one eye's really big, one eye's really small. The gritted teeth and the stubble all over his chin. I think this guy's a dog or a wolf, but he
Yeah, the
still has
generic,
stubble. That's
the
an
generic
unshaven
dog
face. I love stuff
background
like that.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, this as you go through these, it's interesting to see the. I don't want to. I think juxtaposition is the correct word here. The use of the very cartoony style, like it's really abstracted from reality, to the overall heaviness of the
Yeah.
subject matter and the life lessons that you know it's good to learn. It's an interesting delivery system of these pretty heavy subject matters.
And a side note, would you guys agree he's won multiple Best Letter awards at the Eisners? I mean, like, look at this stuff. This is some masterful lettering here, right? Look at these sound effects and
There are jokes frequently that the Eisners should just rename the best letterer category to the Stan Sakai Award
yeah,
because he just
Yeah.
like
wins like
Meryl
every
Streep.
year.
Yeah,
uh,
with Meryl Streep
interestingly,
nominated
he
to get it for.
interestingly uh, the first time he lettered was I think we mentioned earlier. Sergio Aragonés was a friend of his and asked, "Can you letter my comic Gru?" And he just said yes, and then proceeded to ask himself, "Okay, how am I going to do this? Because I don't know how to letter."
Whoa!
And
What
then
a
conveniently around that time, Todd Klein came out with a book on how to letter. So he just
oh
like very fortuitous and got to studying. And I think over the course of various Gru issues, you can see him playing around and with different tools and slowly finding his way. But yeah, this industry has
That's a
recognized him as one of the greatest letterers um, that has ever worked in the industry.
In this tale, A Meeting of Strangers. The first page is Usagi delicately picking up some sushi with chopsticks and it comes to his mouth. He employs this storytelling technique quite a bit, like I just
Interesting.
mentioned. It's
Yeah, with the hoe.
inspired by
Yeah,
Tezuka. And there's an establishing shot. He's in a bar or a restaurant. And you can see from just the word balloon, something sets him off and he gets a feeling that someone's approaching who's not who they appear to be. And then it shows the hand that's kind of moving the flag out of the way or the drapes out of the way. And this female samurai comes into the bar. Now, as she's walking by, he is looking pretty nonchalant, just enjoying his meal. But as she walks by, you can see that Osagi has his hand ready at his sword. And she walks by, nothing happens, so he lets his hand off. This is the first 3 pages of a 22 odd page story, just employed for this. It's obvious that she's a very pivotal character in the story. In fact, there's probably the focus, but he's never met her before, and he is very cautious of her. Later on in the story, they do become allies, and so on. But like, it's just fantastic storytelling. This is like, in a way, edge of
yeah
your seat type stuff, right?
yeah good scene
Good
setting.
scene setting, right?
Yeah, because it is also setting
Yeah,
up,
mood setting as well.
Mood setting.
and
That's the word I
and
was looking for. Fuck. Okay. Yeah, it's
and
great mood
draws
setting.
attention to. Yeah, you're right. She's obviously going to be important. Whether you've read all of these or this is your first one, you can tell. Okay, so he's aware when people are dangerous. She is dangerous. I know that. Where are we going from here? And you're right. The tension build is it sets up the promise of well, that tension is going to be broken at some point.
Well, I mean, further into the scene, so she does end up being a troublesome character. She shows up at this bar and she asks for a drink. He pours her some sake, and she says, "I can't pay for it, so I owe you one." And then another patron comes up to her and he's like, "Well, if you kind of show me a good time, then I'll pay for your drinks all night." And she whips out her sword and does a little number on him, cuts up his clothes, and he goes running. So Usagi flicks her a coin and says, "Here, your drink's on me." She finishes her drink. She gets up. She says, "Thanks, I owe you one," and leaves. That's a really great scene.
Yeah, that is, and that's like a contained story unto itself.
Unto
Yeah,
itself. And
and
until you meet her later on.
what's great about it is the amount of silence that
Yep,
he puts in there, where he lets the visuals tell the story. In a lot of the bigger publishers, in the big two specifically, there's a lot of editors that are a little resistant to this amount of silent scenes,
that's interesting.
and yeah, it's and it comes with from good reason, probably just like the fans get a little loud when they don't get their what they view as their money's worth or whatever. But the point here is that this is Stan Sakai's vision. It's 100% under his control, and there's no editor that's going to tell him, well, the fans don't want this or don't want that. If he wants a 3-page silent sequence, we're gonna get it, and I personally love it.
Yeah,
The pacing, actually, I'm telling you guys now, like I just picked this up. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So the first page has two word balloons, but really they're not really dialogue driven. They're
kinda.
more sound
Yeah,
effects just to establish that he is enjoying his meal. Uh, we can go back and forth whether or not you really needed that one, but
Well,
I
it
think
to what Taylor brings up often, it goes towards the rhythm. It creates a rhythm,
now
and it creates
then
the mood.
the next 2 pages, no word balloons, no sound effects. And then there's a good 2 pages with a lot of dialogue established. So this sets up that already you just went through an intense moment. So to break it up, somebody say something, right?
yeah,
She orders some sake. She orders a drink. She goes through that whole thing with the other patron. She cuts up his clothes. He goes running, and then it calms down again. There's some dialogue here and there, but it's very it's just 1, 2, 3, 4 word balloons, or
yeah.
excuse me, four
It's
panels out of like what, uh, 13, 14 panels here.
and it's pretty
Seven,
terse
seven, yeah.
dialogue at that, right?
Yeah,
It's not descriptive. It is just the minimum of what needs to be said.
and every shot is also interesting. Like he does a
Yes.
bird's eye shot here, even if it's just a character without any background or anything. The expression on his face is fantastic here as she's leaving. The look over her shoulder. It's a very simple style, but it sucks you right in. Right,
And he directs you around the page very well too.
very well.
I would never claim this, but Stan Sakai certainly can. Because to your point, Eric, that there's no editor telling him what to do. There's no editor telling him what fans want. At this point in his career, Stan Sakai can basically, with a lot of resolve, say they don't know what they want. Like I give them what they want, they don't know it until I give it to them. And it's surprising when when you hear about editorial or executives saying, "No, we do." It's like, you know what they've told you they think they want, which is not the same.
uh, in terms of what the fans want, Stan Sakai, he created this character who is, I would say, real in that, like, he's just a guy. He's just walking. I mean, you can liken it to someone like Jack Reacher or whatever modern day hero you want to liken it to, but he's just going through life and he's experiencing
Yeah.
life. There's an overarching story, obviously, but Usagi always ends up in situations or like side quests. He's either getting people out of trouble or he's getting into trouble himself. Like I said, it's not that he's a fearless character. He just takes things as they come. There's a tale in here where he befriends a seaweed farmer. He just happens to be on his travels. He sees the seaweed farmer who's got a lot of load that he's carrying. So he's like, well, let me help you out and I'll take it back. And he follows him back to his home. And the seaweed farmer has his own drama going on, right? So he asks him about it. He's like, well, what can I do to help? You as a reader are Usagi,
Yeah.
and you are asking in your mind the same questions that he would ask. He learns about seaweed farming, and you as the reader also know about or learn about seaweed farming in that, like, he asks, why do you steer the boat backwards? Or, what's with these walls in the pond? And he's like, and the farmer's son looks like he's walking on water, but he's actually got these wooden stilts that he's actually in the water turning the weeds and stuff like that. Like, there's the whole
Okay.
process of seaweed farming is explained in this story, right? And of course, he gets into some trouble. The seaweed farmer has some drama going on with a rival seaweed farmer, and they kind of get into it. And very cleverly, this story is very cleverly resolved. I also said before, when he teams up or he meets a character who comes back later, you've invested so much in that story that a year or so will go by and then that character shows up again. And not only is Usagi surprised and happy, either happy or not happy to see this character, but so are you.
Yeah.
There'll be times where like he's like, oh, again, hey, how you been? Or he's like, oh shit, this guy again. Oh fuck. you know that, and you feel the same way. I don't know how Sakai has done it. Tezuka did it too. That you just invest so much. You're experiencing life through this character. This is a lifelong character. Sakai, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes all the way to the end. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't finish, right?
No, I don't think so.
He puts a lot of himself in this character. Whatever life lessons that he learns and experiences, he's putting it into Usagi, and therefore you are experiencing it too. It's masterful, beautiful, timeless storytelling.
It really is, yeah. And you're right. Like the first time I read a Gen's story, I was like, "Oh man, a rhinoceros! I hate this character." But by the end of that first appearance, you're like, "Ah, this guy is great." And then, yeah, the second time he appears, I'm like, "All right, Gen's back. This is great."
Exactly. He's always traveling alone, but when he makes friends, he makes enemies, he makes friends out of enemies, and he makes enemies out of friends. These are all universal life lessons that we all have to go through. So again, Usagi is a very versatile character. You can drop him in any situation, and I think the mode of taking life as it comes leads to a lot of really insightful stories that you can tell.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
cool.
It's great.
Yeah.
So the thing about Usagi is, and I before doing this artwork, I wanted to kind of research, how would a artist like Sean Murphy or one of those kind of guys would depict Usagi. Would they do it realistically, or would they do it, in a more cartoony style, or what? But I'm trying to start small, so I have to keep constantly reminding myself of these. Like, I have these compositions in my head where I'm just overly or too ambitious, and I'm like, nah. I actually had it in my mind to do a Dark Knight Returns homage to the scene, the splash page of Batman jumping out of the Batmobile
Oh,
for Batwoman. But I just
okay.
couldn't. So yeah, off topic, but like I had her in this kind of the same pose, but she was so chunky you couldn't even tell she was a woman. So I really struggled with that, and I'm like, well, I want her to have like a kind of like a fighter stance. So I did some photo reference on MMA female fighters, and that's how I came up with the one I showed you guys last week. In this case, I wanted to mimic the cover where
Okay.
he's getting shot at by 100 arrows and he's still in that stance, but I just couldn't make it unique to what it was. And so I just did some gesture drawing. I kind of looked up some photographs of different swordsmen and different swords poses, and I just kind of came up with this. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. I did actually have a full pose kind of sketched out here, but it's all black. You'll notice, obviously, in the stories, he wears black, really big MC Hammer black pants, right? So you can't really tell. So I thought that was just kind of going to be a waste of negative space. So I just cropped the piece out here. But I wanted like a bunch, like 100 arrows coming at him. But I
Well, why is
decided not
there
to do
100
foreign
arrows?
Huh?
Sorry, what you decided not to put arrows? Why?
Because he's just looking pretty with a bunch of arrows coming at him, right? He's not in any position to cut the arrows or kind of hide from the arrows or block the arrows or something. So I was like, I just left the arrows out.
It is kind of a ready for a fight rather than mid-fight pose.
Yeah. Let me hold
He
it up
looks
a
like
little bit.
he's posing for a magazine cover, a
Well,
fashion mag.
I'm incapable of drawing ugly people. No. Yeah. What do you got, Taylor?
Actually, so the manga Vagabond is also heavily informed by Miyamoto Musashi. I hope I got those in the right order. That that I've been reading. I think I'm on volume 24, so it's definitely up in the upper range. And because he's just met the Deaf Swordsman
Mm-hmm.
on the battlefield for the first time. Anyway, great series. Also check it out. But so I've tried to incorporate some of that style into it. I probably shouldn't have added the color because the manga is black and white, and I don't know that it actually. I was my thought was, oh, he spun around to slice these guys' necks, but I don't know that that really translates. But in terms of the pose and the background, the kind of atmosphere that I was going for the background, I'm actually looking back on it, going, yeah, that's pretty nice. I'm glad I've been experimenting with ink, color, line. It doesn't always work out, but I think I learn something new every time, especially about planning. how
Yeah.
much how much I just have to really don't get too excited about the idea. Just slow down and
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I
Really,
can
really
relate.
think about it.
Yeah.
So, Taylor, how you're drawing comics as well? How are you juggling doing an illustration every now and then, but also drawing comics?
Well, because I do comics digitally, that is I'm able to kind of sequester them in different rooms.
Okay.
When it's this, I can take this just about anywhere. So I peel off time, watching terrible reality shows with my wife for uh, early morning on a Sunday or something.
I didn't do any art for this show, which is a recurring statement I'm making every episode because, yeah, I'm still drawing assorted crisis events and there's not a lot of free time. I guess as of the airing of this episode, the solicitation for issue 2 is out. So maybe we can pop up the cover
Hell
for
yeah!
issue 2 on the
Da, da,
screen
da,
right now.
da.
That'll be out in April. But yes, we're finalizing the colors on issue 1 still. And so I am going to send that PDF to you two. And hopefully in the future we'll have an episode. I'll get Dennis on and we can, I don't know, talk about what it is to put out an image book, maybe something along those lines.
All right. All right, guys. So if you're looking for something to read that's affordable, these are, I think, $30 US, $40 Canadian. It's over 600 pages of content. That's almost 300 issues worth of material. You can't lose with Stan Sakai's Usagi Yojimbo. Okay, if you're an aspiring artist, there's a lot of techniques in here, a lot of storytelling exercises that you can apply to your own stuff. So pick it up. This is volume 1. We'll have links for all 9 volumes in the description below. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts. If you guys read Usagi, let us know below what you think. All right, we'll see you next time.